My name is Joyce Rovincer Mpanga, ni Masembe. Before I got married, my name was Masembe. I got married to Fred Mpanga, formerly Attorney General of Uganda. But I've done work in my own. I began as a teacher, trained, and I was attached to the Faculty of Education as a part-time lecturer straight after university. Taught in Makerere College School. Became a member of the African Uganda Teachers Association, and even came to top it and be president of it. While teaching at Makerere College School, I was nominated to be a member of Legislative Council, for which I served a little while because at the time I was named member, I had got a scholarship to go to United States, get a second degree to make sure that I could become a full-time lecturer at Makerere. I've told you I was appointed a part-time lecturer in the Faculty of Education. At that time, Uganda was Africanizing a number of posts. So some of us who were lucky, I think because I got a first-class diploma in education, I was named part-time lecturer straight away. So I went to the United States, came back with my Master of Science for Education. Why science when my first degree was BA? It's because America core education as science. When I came back, I had no opening in Makerere straight away. I became deputy headmistress of Gayaza High School, which I thought was a very quick promotion because I taught for only 2 years before I left for my master's degree. To come back and be made a deputy headmistress of Gayaza, I thought was a very big jump. While there, I then saw an advert by Makerere University for a space in the Faculty of Education. I applied. Fortunately, I was taken in and became a lecturer in the Faculty of Education, lecturing in history of education and philosophy of education. It was quite a big jump because I was joining teachers who had taught me before. And I think I probably was the first African woman to become a lecturer at Makerere. There were very, very few African lecturers at all at that time. The work that earned me these medals, one was being a member of Parliament. I've told you I was nominated into Legislative Council. Lukiiko was prior to Parliament, before independence. Then I became president of the National Council of Women. So when this government was ushered in, I was president of the National Council of Women. We represented Uganda in, there was going to be, what do we call it? Sorry. Commonwealth. The heads of Commonwealth conference that was going to take place in Canada. But the ministries that were representing women or took women met in Harare before the summit of the heads of government. Mm-hmm. At that time, it was Kakonge, who was the Minister of Community Development, who was in charge of women. Mm-hmm. But when he went to ask for permission to attend, the president asked him, why don't women represent themselves? So why don't women represent themselves? Mm-hmm. Victoria Sektoreko was deputy minister in agriculture. So she was asked to lead that delegation, and she took me as president of the National Council of Women, together with Sarah Antiro, who was in the Prime Minister's office, head of NGOs. When we came back, Victoria told me, Joyce, if you are interested in this, you go and write the report. I wrote the report to the president of what took place in Harare, because all the issues that we had discussed were going to be discussed in the heads of Commonwealth conference in Canada that year. Before the president went to attend it, he asked Victoria, and Victoria said, no, Joyce wrote that report. So the president called me. We were at a party, it was the Independence Party, I think, in the State House. And then we talked about women, we talked about education. I didn't know he was interviewing me for being a minister. But we talked for some time, and then he said, let me go to Vancouver. When I come back, I'll call you. When he came back, nobody called me. I was then deputy chairman of the Public Service Commission. So one day we were going to Princess Anne of UK came to visit Uganda. And I was at the time so hot in Uweso. We were working on starting Uweso with Mrs. Museveni. And they told us, oh, you are going to entertain her in Luweero Triangle. So while busy preparing the girls who present the flower, the orphans that were going to be presented to Princess Anne, Mrs. Buteri rang me. Said, have you listened to the news? And I said, no. Said, no, I'm not going to spoil the fun. Put on the news in Lunyoro and hear what they are saying. When I heard what they were saying, was that the president was going to start a Ministry of Women Affairs in President's office, and the minister was Joyce Mpanga. Nobody had told me anything about it. I received it with glee because we had wanted to have a women's ministry. And we had tried through National Council of Women to pressurize cabinet before to start a ministry for us, and nobody did. But I didn't know I was going to be the victim to start it.
victim.
Then, when I went to see the president, I asked him, when you announced this ministry, what did you actually mean? And he told me, in your report, you told me I have no policy on women. You go and make it. And when he said that, I said, do you know that you are giving me a blank paper and a pen to write on whatever I want? He said, you go and start it. I was starting it in his office. I had there was no ministry. I was the only one in the ministry. The PS gave me one of the assistant secretaries to work with me. This was very near Women's Day, March. And the president wanted to launch this ministry on Women's Day. So I had very little time to work on it. But fortunately, I came from the women's movement. I came from so many women organizations that were all pressurizing for a ministry. So I quickly called people I used to work with over there to talk over what we expect in a ministry. And on March 8th, 88, the president launched it. And for him, I called all the women that had been working with women. The Pumla Chisonkole, the Mary Senkatuka, all those people that I knew were pressurizing for this ministry. And we started. Then my PS told me, that is PS for the president, that we are now very busy working on so many things. I think we'll work on that ministry and it will start next year. And I told the president, where you took me from Public Service Commission. I had work to do. I don't want to sit in a ministry and do nothing. He said, no, take stuff that you need. So I said, I need a PS. He said, but we have a PS. And I said, the PS for president will not think the women's work is important. I would like a PS that would be working only on women. And he gave me the right to do it. Unfortunately, having been in a Public Service Commission, I knew all the PSs and knew who was more gender friendly or who could do. So I took Kasiria. Was it Kasiria? I think it was Kasiria. And the women I was working with asked, why a man? And I said, a man, because this is going to be a ministry like any other ministry. If they are only women, then people are going to ignore us, push us in the end. Those are your affairs. I suggested to the president that we change the name to Women in Development, because this is exactly what we wanted to do, to weave women into the main stream development of the country. And when he agreed to the title, it just took off. Because even at international, we had just had a conference in Nairobi, at which we were pushing women in development. Yeah. So I became a minister. And as a minister, you become a member of parliament, although you are not a voting member, because I had not been voted for. So that year I joined the parliament. That year I used to go to parliament, I used to go to cabinet. but I had not been elected. When government wanted to expand legislative council, and we were going to have an election, people in my area, where I come from, we had gone to launch Uweso in Bukuya, and people in Kasana told me, why don't you stand? Why don't you stand in this election? Come and stand in our constituency. And I thought, anyway, I haven't been in that area although that's where I was born. That's what I called my home. But I had lived in Kampala for most of my life. But when we went to Bukuya, I discovered that Bukuya is part of Luwero's Triangle, and nobody had actually helped them at all to get anything, to rehabilitate whatever had been destroyed. So I was attracted and said no. I saw what Rhoda was doing in Chiwoga, because we had started another branch of Uweso there. So I said, no, I think I better come back to Mubende, because that is where my father used to get my fees from. He had land there, and every time we were going to go back, we had to go there and see if there was any money from this and that, and we were educated. So I decided to stand in Kasanda. I was standing against somebody who was my cousin also. And we used to stay in the same house, go and do our campaign, and come back and meet and pray together, and that was Sepikaju. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we were lining behind someone. By the time I decided, people had already decided to line behind Kajubi. So in Kasanda, I didn't go through. And I said, do I go back to Kampala? Because Kampala, I was determined to be in the parliament and to be elected. If I came back to Kampala, people knew me and I wouldn't have had any problem. But I said, no, I have had people who have backed me. If I go back to Kampala, they will say I only wanted to use them. Let me go back and stand in Mubende. At that time, women parliamentarian, these places for women, were voted on differently after the main course. And you had to go to the headquarters. Unfortunately, those people pushed me through, and I became a member of parliament for Mubende district. That's how I came back to parliament. Again, the president gave me to be Minister for Women in Development. And then I started on it. I started thinking, what is it? What do we need here? And when I looked, I thought the most difficult thing against women was our constitution. Because the Constitution 62, if you read it, if anybody discriminated against you because you are Catholic, because you are Mukiga, or because you are this and that, you could go to court and say, no, these people. But they did not mention women. So I thought the most important thing we could get was getting a gender-sensitized constitution. But we had been given very, very little money, because, mind you, we started in March. By that time, almost the whole budget is finished. So Kionga tells me, we'll give you money for the minister, we'll give you money for your assistant or what they call them, we'll give you money for the PS and his secretary and your drivers, and we shall accommodate you in the next financial year. And this itched me. How could I sit in the president's office for a whole year doing absolutely nothing? Joyce Mpanga was our ambassador in Nordic countries. And I told Joyce Mpanga, I know there is a lot of money in Nordic countries for women. Why don't you get me some for some women projects? So then I'll have something to do. He said, no, I'll get you invited, because they don't know we have a ministry for women. But when I tell them, I think they will be excited. So when she told them, they were excited and invited me to visit. I was going for a visit. I wondered, who do I go with? Janet Mukwaya was the head of the women desk in NRM. So I told her we are going together, but before we go, I want you and I to sit in the same office for a whole day and discuss exactly what my dreams are for this ministry. Because my aim is to at least to get some money to back me up for women activities this year. So both of us went. We were sitting at lunch. We were invited to lunch by SIDA, head of SIDA, Sweden. And while we were eating, I told him, you know, the most important thing that is going to happen in Uganda is writing a new constitution. He said, is that so? I said, yes. But we women would like to give in our views also, because the commission, Odoche Commission, had already been appointed. And to it through cabinet, I had recommended Miriam Matembe and Mary Maitum. Why those two? They were both lawyers. They were both very eager women activists. And I had worked with them in the National Council of Women. So I knew they could, while Miriam would say it loudly, Mary Maitum would say it quietly but very firmly. And I thought the combination of the two would get us what we want. So this man asked me, do you have that project written? I had discussed it with Mr. Kassiye, who was my PS, but we had not written it. And I said, yes. He said, I'll finance it for you. And I said, that's great. This was November. He said, do you know that I needed that money yesterday, but not today or tomorrow? And he said, I'll be as fast as you were. So we left that lunch very excited, both of us, that we were going to get this project financed. I rang my PS that night and told him, you remember what we discussed here? Make the draft, and if anybody asks you for it, don't wait for me. Give it to me, we shall be able to change or do anything, but at least let's not miss this chance. By the time we came to Denmark, Denmark had learned from SIDA that there was this project on constitution. And Danida tells me, I've heard of that great project for constitution. Give it to me. I'll do it. And I said, but SIDA has I said, Swedish people are very slow. So you give it to us, we are going to be faster than there. So I said, you are talking to a very hungry woman. Whoever gives it to me first, I'll take it because I know we are ready, almost ready to take off. By the time I came back to Uganda, Danida had sent their representative from Nairobi, had discussed with my PS this project on constitution, and had promised to finance it. So that was one of my best things. We had other things here and there. Pan-African women, this started before we were independent. Mwalimu Nyerere was the original mover. How did I come into it? Just by being named by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Uganda, headed by Odaka, to go and represent and lead a delegation to the Pan-African Women Conference. For some odd reason, I did not attend the one in Tanzania, the very first one. But the next one was going to take place in Liberia, Monrovia. So I led a delegation of 4 from Uganda. We didn't have the organization, but OAU had started, and in Ethiopia, OAU was fighting to release all the other countries that had not been gained independence yet. And the beginning of Pan-African Women was based on OAU that had been launched in Ethiopia. Who did I go with? I didn't choose who I went with, but Florence Masaba, she was Florence Masaba at that time. She became a Nekion a little later. There was Nancy Kajumbula, daughter of the Kyabazinga of Busoga, and a friend I had met in Makerere, and another girl called Christine Mwa. Christine Mwa came from Acholi. She was in the Ministry of Information, was in Radio Uganda. So I was given these 3 to lead to Monrovia, to a conference of Pan-African women. When we went there, other people were ahead of us. The French-speaking people had been more active in Pan-African matters, and they produced the president. They gave us papers all in French when we went to start the meeting. And I told my friends, I think I'm going to stop this. These people have to give us the translation, because we're not going to be little Cinderellas here when we don't know what is going on. And they said, we'll translate as we go. They had not arranged for simultaneous translation. So the meeting was going to be in French. When we started, I quickly put up my arm and said, I come from Uganda, we are English speaking, and we don't see any papers we are going to use. They said, we'll translate to you as we go along. And I said, no, we need our papers also translated so that we can participate fully. And I remember particularly Nancy pinching me, we are going to sabotage this, we better, no, they better give us the English version. And for some odd reason, they did see that it was unfair. So that first day we didn't have a meeting. They went and translated the papers quickly. In the evening they gave us the papers, and next day we started the meeting. Since Uganda had chosen carefully, Florence was a community development officer, Florence Nekion. Nancy was a teacher or something, I can't remember. She was a teacher, I think. And Christine was in radio. So somehow, when we were discussing, people thought Uganda was more advanced in women affairs than others, although we thought Liberia was far ahead of us, because Liberia had a conference, had an organization that hosted us. We didn't. In Uganda, we had so many little, we had Catholic women, Mothers Union, University Women, Community Development Club. So we were so many little something, and whenever we came back from international meetings, we didn't know exactly what to do with the resolutions we had passed. When we came back, we wrote a very pretty conference report. But who do we give it to? The ministry that had sent us was the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs had nothing to do with women development. So we thought, what do we do? Let's ask the women to form a one organization like we saw in Monrovia. Because before we left Monrovia, everybody had agreed that Uganda is so advanced, we should have our next conference in Uganda. We quietly didn't tell them we are so backward. We are in little bits. So we invited the women leaders at that time, the Pumula Chosonkole, the Mary Senkatuka was PS, Karule Setara and others, you know. We had meetings and we decided to form a Uganda Association of Women's Organizations. Not women, women's organizations, because we are federating all the women together and we were going to choose one. We asked Miri Obote to be our patron at that time because she was the first lady. They elected Teresa Mulindwa as the president. Teresa Mulindwa, she's died. Teresa Mulindwa was the president. I can't remember who else we elected. And we had agreed that whichever one of our organization goes out to discuss to international gathering, when they come back, they should let us all know what they have done. We also agreed that we should choose a theme once a year so that all of us women organizations could work on it. And at least we thought it would help us to develop together, not each one in their little pockets. But now we had that. And it did work. Unfortunately, I went into exile and left it working. When I came back, Amin had taken over. Amin had collected all the women and told them, get away with he abolished all women organizations, including the one we had just started. So it didn't go very far. But I remember that meeting when Amin invited them. Teresa Mlindo was the president. Teresa Mlindo called me. I had just come back from exile. Teresa said, come on, Nimugandi, Teresa, I have been in exile. I'm going to be very low. I'm not going to come out in anything because I don't know where we are going. And I think I was right. I didn't know exactly where we are going. Then came 75. UN had chosen it to be a women's year, women's decade, and a women's year. And at the end of it, we were going to have a conference on UN conference on women in Mexico. Uganda government chose who was to go to that. But then Mary Senkatuka, who was the PS, said, I think we are going to be embarrassed because the people they have chosen probably don't know much about women and women development. So she decided to run a 1 week talking about the UN theme. And she asked me and a few others to do the leading. And I remember one person saying, Mary, but are those people going to choose us to go? And she said, no, don't worry. When we have a very good paper, people will look at it and say, but there must have been brains in Uganda that made it. But where are they? But at least we shall have helped our country. Anyway, we did go. We had a whole week on development of women, and they went to Mexico. In Mexico, a resolution was taken that we were not going to stop what the women's year, we were going to continue. And they decided that each government in UN should have a vehicle through which it is developing women. It could be a ministry, it could be any organization they chose. So when they came back, they reported. And Amin told the people in the community development, you go and make a constitution for that thing. Those people quietly used to come behind and ask us to help them to write down what we wanted. So we had what did we call it? We called it Uganda Association of Women's Organization. It was Uganda. It was National Council of Women of a kind, anyway. It was launched by the then president, and it started. But then, of course, came the toppling of that government. But since this National Council of Women had brought us women who are interested in women development together, we sort of continued in a very, very low gear. Then another change of then there was another conference, UN conference in Nairobi. That was an eye-opener to quite a lot of women in Uganda. It was so near us that many of the people who were not chosen to go on in the government forum, went into the NGO side sector. The government then was then a Obote government. We had March 8th of that year. Do you remember? 85, I think. March 8th, some women, I remember the Okwenjes, the what, persuaded the media, Obote, to invite us for the Women's March 8th that year. So we were invited to State House. And in State House, Mrs. Obote tells her husband, we would like to observe this day every year. He said, why not? Do it if you like. So we started recognizing International Women's, do we call it International Women's Day?
Yes.
That was the first time it was held, run by government, led by Mary Obote, who was the first lady. Then we were preparing for the UN conference, and we were looking for money to take as many women as we can. And Nyalali was the Minister for Community Development. Nyalali then comes and tells National Council, I hear you are going to have a conference of your own before you go to Nairobi, but the cabinet is interested in giving you the paper you shall take. Can you imagine? We are there. UN has sent us what to think about. Government is going to give us the paper we shall take. And I remember we were sitting in, I was on the board that governed that National Council. Remember we were sitting one evening, and Nyalali came and said, you are all arrested, come. He took us to 4th floor, President's office. He put us in one room, the president was in the other, and they kept coming to question us why to this conference which we were going to have, we did not invite UPC people. But we had not invited UPC. Nobody had invited anybody. The only thing National Council had done had said, Mothers Union, send us your president, so and so send us. They were taking just the top leaders of all the women organizations. And we sat there for more than, I think we were there for more than 4 hours. Then afterwards, the president called us in. They discovered that among us there were some UPC women, because nobody had said UPC women will not be among the leaders. Since we invited only leaders, UPC were there. So the president said, you bring them in. When I came, I remember he told me, oh, in the Uganda Council of Women, the old time, I remember you used to be very active. Why don't you get this money? And I said, Mr. President, you remember me, I was then young, but now I'm old. I'm not able to, anyway. So he said, for whatever shilling you collect, you people collect, government will give you a shilling. And this helped us. But some of us who were not UPC knew we were not going to be chosen. But then we had two delegations, one NGO, to which anybody who had money sent somebody. The other was government, led by Mary Obote, and most of the members did not come back. I remember, I think, only 3 of us who were not wife of somebody or somebody, secretary to somebody, went as representative. There was Florence Nakion. There was Mrs. The Minister of Education, Namirembe Bitamazire. Namirembe Bitamazire was head of the Teachers Association. Namirembe Bitamazire was in government as deputy head of the teachers organization. I was taken because I was deputy chairman of Public Service Commission, and Nekion because she was the secretary to the National Council of Women. All the others were either First Lady, wife of Minister so-and-so, friend of Mr. so-and-so. But a lot of women attended the Nairobi conference, and it was a big eye-opener. When they came back, people were really eager to work on it. This is how we start ACFOD. We get ACFOD started. We got the women lawyers going. We got so many other organizations. And when this government took over, we were allowed for the first time to choose our own president. Before then, we did not choose a president for National Council. Government chose who will be the head of National Council. But that year, 86, when NRM took over and said, you can elect your people if you like. And that's when I was elected the president of the National Council of Women. And that is why I was the one who went to Harare with Victoria Sekitoleko. And that is why I was probably chosen to be the first minister of women in development. How did I become a patriot? I grew up in a family. If there was politics of that day, that I would say it was politics. My father was a chief in the Uganda government. And in the Uganda government, there was a confusion of jurisdiction, administration, and development. When you are Gomola chief, everything went with you. So I grew up in a house where all these things met and where all these were developed. I went to Ndeje High School and I was probably recognized as a possible leader. I was very young, but I was a prefect by the time I left that school. I came to Gayaza High School, and I think the most important thing I became was being a head girl. Head girl was head prefect. I was head girl for 2 years. First of all, I joined in junior 1. Our classes were different from yours now. We did 6 years of primary school. You went into junior 1, junior 2, junior 3. Junior 3, you sat another examination. This was Uganda-wide. Then when I finished it, I wanted to go into nursing. I went to be interviewed at Mengo, and they said, you are too young, we are not taking you. We take only people when they are 16 and above, and I was 15. So what do? My father said, tell them to take you to Budo because there are still more classes in Budo which you have not attended. But I didn't want to go to a boys' school, so I didn't tell my headmistress that. And when the time came, my father asked, but we asked asked her to ask you to ask for a place at Budo. And then John Cox asked me, did you? And I said, I did not tell you because I did not want to go to Budo. I wanted to stay at Gayaza. And she says casually, anyway, never mind. We shall take your class on. I think you will be our first Cambridge examination class. So we were top of the school for 3 years. When we were in S4, we went into S5, S6, we sat O-level, which was Cambridge. I passed, I went into Makerere. Nobody, I think in Makerere we were very patriotic, really. Because I remember we used to we celebrated India when India became independent. We celebrated Ghana. Ghana has become independent. And we used to invite politicians like Tom Mboya, like Kiwanuka, Jolejo, like Musazi, to come and address us. And we used to have some of the secretaries from the Commonwealth, if they were passing through, we would, but this was Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, plus Malawi, plus what, or East and Central together. I remember when we were at Makerere, we were so mindful. We wanted even the Lukiiko to be elected. When they refused to pass the what, we came to demonstrate. We came to Bulange to demonstrate why no direct elections. And I remember very well, we were near the gate. Children collected a number of papers and they threw them onto the Katikiro, which was undone at that time. But that was a political action. In fact, I remember turning to me, now we're Mola wa Masembe Moli. So Mola wa Masembe, because my father was Makulu wa Lubiri. He doesn't expect Mola wa Masembe to be demonstrating. But anyway, when we were in Makerere, we used political activities were in halls. We used to elect our guild presidents. Each hall had a representative in the guild. And I remember, I think from about my second year, I was on that guild. Because Mary Stewart, we were very few. When I first joined, we were 13. By the time I left, we were 50. So when we are sending people to represent us, some of the girls were not interested at all. Those of us who were interested kept being pushed back.